Good morning, fine people. I have a blackout in my house. There's no electricity, so this is going to be a little dark. But the subject is important, and I wanted to share it because I think there's people that need to hear this. I know there are. People wonder, well, what is true religion? What do we do? Jesus tells us to love Him is to obey His commands, and the Bible is full of commands. Um, One could get overwhelmed sometimes, but there is a basic essence to these commands, and they really are simple. And Jesus boiled them down. He said, love your neighbor as you love yourself, and love God with all of your heart, mind, and soul. And this boils it down, but doesn't mean we ignore the lines throughout the Bible that give us the details of what that really means. Uh, For instance, James 1:27 tells us true religion is to look after the orphan and the widow and to stay unpolluted from the world. And this is true religion. This is James. This is Jesus' brother. This is a man well versed and well understanding and wise. And this is not something that he just made up off the spot and just something that he just kind of thought of it on his own. Throughout the whole Bible, there have been a specific group of people that we are to look after, um, and it is always the same group, but sometimes it has been, sometimes it's just one or two of them, but almost always it is the orphan or the fatherless, and and um, and then the other ones would be the the widow, the helpless, and the poor, and the foreigner, and the priests. And in fact, when it starts talking about tithing in the beginning, they don't the you don't hear this at church, but the tithing, which is 10%, and it's just the yielding extra of your crops, is to be given not just to the priesthood, but to the foreigner, to the elderly or the widow, to the fatherless, and the poor and the oppressed. And this is very important that from the beginning we are to have this quality about our practice, about what we do. So a lot of people go to church and they get this warm fuzzy feeling that what does it do for you when you get out? I mean, I went for years and I loved church and I've learned so much, especially in Bible studies. And I learned a lot, but in practice, I started finding that there was something missing. I wanted to do something. I wanted something my life to actually have tangible um, results, or tangible, just something for me to do. And it doesn't mean that we earn our salvation. That's not what I'm saying. Salvation is from grace. I mean, we do not earn that. We're not going to become great in heaven. Well, I mean, that's something different, but we're not going to earn our way. That's not like, will God like me if I do this? It's not the purpose at all. No, there's a certain song in your heart. There's a certain uh, calling that is in there, and I hear it just ringing loudly in my life and in my heart. And I have this strong desire to serve this purpose, and a lot of it comes from my experiences, my hard experiences in my life. But we all, regardless of our whatever experiences, I know everybody has tumultuous and trying times in their life, especially anybody who's called, because it tells us in the Bible that we should take joy in our suffering, because our joy, not only does it lead to character and builds hope and those things, but it says in the Bible that that God chastises the one He loves like a son. And so we don't want to lose our faith because of these storms we go into. And in fact, the peace that we find in the storm is God. That is where we our closeness will come from, is when we start relying on Him during the hardest times. And I just want to elaborate a little bit by what it means when it says to help to look after the widow and the orphan. I've explored this topic so much, and it's like I said, it's throughout the whole Bible. So many different uh, people throughout the Bible talk about it. Job said, "I'd rather my arm fall off at the joint if I was to deny justice to the fatherless in the courts." Um, it's just there's so many. Jeremiah talks about how the fat and sleek and lazy people, or he had some derogatory terms for people who basically are gluttonous and do not care about others. And he said that these people deny justice to the fatherless, and just it's just over and over and over. Psalms, if you just look up fatherless or look up orphan, but what is fatherless, and what does that mean? What can we actually do? Well, in Amos 5:12, it tells us to hate evil and love good, and maintain justice in the courts. Justice is a divine concept. That is one thing that we should be seeking all the time. We should be seeking fairness and justice at all times. God is the ultimate deliverer of justice. There's nothing we can do to be absolutely pure and just, in His eyes, that He's the one that can set things right. Only He can. But we must seek to maintain this. We must seek a fair court. So, how the courts are one aspect of what we can do to help people, the elderly and the widow. I mean, the orphan. And we got to think about this group of people and just think about them for a second. I'm not talking about children who have been harmed by their parents. I'm not only talking about them, anyways. And they're sitting there in an orphanage, and we have to go by and say hello to them, maybe bring them some snacks or something. That's not what it's calling us to do. It's well, you can do that, but there's much more to it. Um, you can seek legislative changes. The laws of our land are important, and some people will tell you that the laws of the land are nothing that a Christian should worry about. I disagree, because those laws govern us, tell us directions that we need to that we go, that we're mandated to go, and oftentimes they counter what God has for us, what God's law is. God tells us to look after the fatherless. And when it says fatherless, it doesn't mean just a father that went off to prison and is dead or something like that. It's just talking about the whole gamut of a child without parents. What is a child without parents? Oftentimes it's just a child who's been alienated from a parent. Sometimes the courts have removed a parent. Sometimes the parent is a bad parent and is going through whatever they're going through. There's just a whole number of reasons that a child becomes an orphan. Hats off to the step parents out there who step in when a biological parent just steps off. Sometimes that is the case, and sometimes biological parents are pushed out, and sometimes they just don't have the fortitude to make it through. There's so many stories, so many different scenarios of this. And we're not to go, and one thing we're not to do is to try to replace their parent in any kind of way. We're not to try to encourage them not to have a parent. We are to encourage, the Ten Commandments tell us, honor father and mother. That is essential. It's the only commandment with a promise that our life would be long and bountiful. This is important because we are not to tear down the institution of parenting. We are to lift it up. We are to empower parents so that they can be what the children need them to be. So there may be times when parents fail and they step off, but we are to lift them up, find ways in our legislation that lifts them up. We are to find ways in our churches that lift them up. Whether it's drug addicts, it can be a number of different scenarios where a parent steps out of where he's supposed to be or she's supposed to be. And that doesn't make them any less of a person than any one of us. We just need to figure out ways to lift them up for the child's sake and for our sake, because when we put these children without parents into society, they become burdens on society in so many ways. Not only do they suffer themselves horribly in so many ways, not every time, but ultimately everybody without a parent suffers somehow. But the statistics tell us that these children that don't have access to both parents suffer not just emotional, but physical ailments. They have behavior problems in different ways. Their relationships are affected. This continues on into multiple generations, and it's a cycle, and it becomes generational, and it just causes havoc. We have criminals that come out of this category. Most of our criminals don't have access to both parents, especially their father. This is crucial to society. If anything else, do it for that. But God tells us for a reason. There's a reason. Everything in the Bible is beneficial. It's not there just to overlord you. You know, people who tell you, you know, that's why I say religion is such a, a tricky avenue. James just makes it very clear what true religion is. I mean, he doesn't mince words. We are to help the fatherless. And there, like I said, there's all these categories, and there's these different ways you can contribute to organizations, or you can be active, or you can just see a parent in need and see a child in need and encourage them to love their parent, encourage that parent to reach out and give them tools and show them ways in which they can learn to be a better parent, because it is a hard job to do. It doesn't just come naturally, um, at least not to be a good parent. So you can seek legislative changes. Unfortunately, this is like, this baffles people. Like, they don't follow the law and the legislative process. And I'm just, I'm learning more and more about it. And here I am, old man, and I'm finally getting it. But there's no reason that a young person can't figure this stuff out and start with the legislative, supporting from a young age. It doesn't take a rocket scientist. All they want is your input, and the public can go there and input, and you can go there and you can petition to the delegates and the senators, and you can ask them, just tell them what your concerns are, and that's how they pass laws. Often it's just one person comes to them, sometimes multiple people. But I'm telling you, if two or three people came to them with the same problem, it amplifies the chance that they're going to seek a law change. And these law changes can be huge. They can change the course of history. We think these laws are meaningless, and because a lot of times judges don't follow them, but sometimes they have enormous effect, and oftentimes for the negative. Sometimes we have to speak against laws. So we have to seek wisdom, and the Bible tells us when we seek wisdom, it will be answered. We will find it. I encourage you so much to read the scriptures. Read Psalms 140 through 146 is a great one I just read a couple days ago. The Proverbs talks about wisdom. Anything in the Bible will be beneficial as food to your soul. Jesus said that you can survive off of the Word of God alone, and the Word of God is not just the book in the Bible, but is on your heart. But the Word of God is Jesus. Jesus was the Word, and to know and understand Jesus is enough to sustain us. But I just want to touch on one more thing in that directive on true religion, and it's I know it's something that I also find am passionate about, um, and it's the other one. It's the widow. We're not just talking, again. It's not just a specific. It's just it's in other words, it's not just the female widow, but it's just the elderly that can't care for themselves. When they say a widow or they say the fatherless, it means that it's the person that lost the supply of wealth and income and protection, because it was a patriarchal, I guess if you want to call it that, but the male was the provider in those ways, and when they don't have that, they're left susceptible to the world, and that's when we need to step in. Well, there are frail old men and frail old ladies, and just elderly in general, whether frail or not, that are in positions that cannot care for themselves properly. And this is a sad, sad thing, because we all are headed that direction. And imagine being left alone, and just after your whole life of trying your best and doing your hardest in life, or even making mistakes, of course, obviously. But regardless, you're human and we all deserve compassion. And these elderly that are out there that we so often just ignore, and we throw them in homes, and we just have no concern for them. I mean, we, at least with children there's a movement, but with elderly there's hardly anything. And it's just a sad shame. And there's so much you can do. You probably got 5 people on your block right now that are just alone 99% of the time. What difference you can make by just being a part of their lives in some small way. So with this, I just want to encourage you to understand that the Bible is there to help us and lift us and to guide us and draw us closer to our Creator. And this is a good thing. And I hope this message finds you, and it seeks right to your heart, because this is the message that I live by and I'm passionate about. And I really hope that this, speaks to your heart, and somebody will make some different decisions in their life and to follow these directives that are so lovingly laid out for us. God bless. Have a beautiful day.